The movement was begun by a scientist who discovered, quite by accident, these signals being sent. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered.
They want their weapon.
Look out for Charlie.
I want that son of a bitch dead. I want him dead.
In the last video, I talked to you about parallel construction. And in this one, I want to go a little bit further and actually show you an example of how this would play out. And I chose the James Holmes case because I could simplify it very easily, and it's pretty common knowledge what happened with him. So let's check it out. Let's just dive right into it. This is James Holmes' timeline, and it's very simple and to the point. First, Holmes moves to Colorado to attend school. After he's there for a few weeks, because this only takes a couple months to happen, Holmes begins to experience strange incidents. Out of fear and being alone in a new city, he decides to buy a firearm. You have to realize that he's totally isolated when he gets there. He's by himself, he's in a brand new city, alone. Then, strange incidents start to turn into full-blown RF attacks that include the voice of Obama while he's alone in his apartment. Because of all this spins James Holmes out. They're keeping him up. He's awake for weeks on end. He drops out of school due to the bewilderment of the attacks. The RF attacks and rogue human body communication. Alright? Once they know they've got him, he's dropped out of school. The attacks intensify to create isolation, bewilderment, and creating the illusion of psychosis. Then at some point, Holmes is manipulated or asked via RF weapon to meet with his attackers. This is a good cop, bad cop tactic. It's used all the time. They'll say, hey, we got the wrong guy. Just meet us behind the movie theater at blah, 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 blah time and meet with our guy and we'll talk about it. And when someone has been up for weeks on end and their reality is bent by this, they are very, very possibly willing to do this. And at the end, Holmes drives to the movie theater. It's as simple as that when you look at the James Holmes timeline. Now let's look at the parallel construction timeline. And what this will do is it will not only show you how this works, but it will show you how easy it is. They didn't need that much. One person could have done most of the actual field work that was necessary to do this around James Holmes. So, in the beginning, before James moves to Colorado to attend school, or just before, he's chosen as an unwitting participant in this operation. Right after he gets there, random strange events are centered around Holmes to sensitize him / make him aware that something is happening around him. Then, at this point, they're watching his reactions, watching what he does, watching what he's doing. Possible scenarios are predicted and different scripts are generated for the target, depending on what he does. Alright? Soon after that, Holmes is now fully sensitized and experiencing high strangeness. He goes out and he buys firearms, as stated in James Holmes' timeline. Then, what happens is, the script takes a big turn and starts to build on the narrative that Holmes has purchased firearms. This is where the script begins to solidify. And right after that, sock puppet accounts are created in Holmes' name. He didn't even get on Facebook. He was too busy. He was a nerd in a good way. He was too busy to be on Facebook, but he had an adult friend finder profile with him with a porn star. Terribly photoshopped photos. It was horrible, and it was clearly fake. So these sock puppets accounts are created in Holmes' name, and one of them actually asked, "Will you visit me in prison?" He did not do this. This was a sock puppet account. And this builds a digital paper trail that didn't exist before, and for the news to warp and twist into whatever they want. Since he didn't have Facebook, it was very easy for them to do this. So there's a good and a bad thing to having an online presence. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you're not there, someone can write it for you. So then, a call is made to the Batman director using the names James Holmes. then ridiculous, like low IQ questions are asked. But regardless, this creates a trail that can be looked at later by law enforcement and news agencies and blah, 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 blah. This is the parallel construction timeline. After that, after James drops out of school in his timeline, targeting efforts ramp up, and since Holmes is isolated and has made rash decisions like quitting school, this seals the narrative. Now, numerous new posts are made in online accounts that are supposed to be him, to create the illusion of a psychopath. And as his attacks intensify in real life, here in the parallel construction timeline, Holmes' apartment is entered to make it look like someone's entered his home to freak him out. His journal is stolen, and he now begins to booby trap his home. That's where good cop, bad cop tactics start to be played on him via RF weapons and rogue human body communication. Then, the premiere has already been chosen. Tactics ensue to convince Holmes to be there at the opening. However, he might not even know that it's the opening of the show because it wasn't him that called the director. Why does James Holmes care about Batman? He's too busy to have a fucking Facebook account. Use your head. The premiere has already been chosen. Copies of any defensive gear that Holmes has bought are acquired. So these people buy copies. If he has a gas mask because he's scared of poison in his apartment because of weird things, if he has a bulletproof vest because he's scared, or a gun, all that stuff is bought and paralleled. Holmes is manipulated to further booby trap his apartment to create a newsworthy scenario. Then, before Holmes drives to the movie theater, operators are put in place for the night of the premiere, and then in between this spot and when Holmes drives to the movie theater, Holmes' journal is mailed or delivered to his college counselor. This is all of a month and a half, 2 months, and did not take much. And that's what a lot of people don't understand, is when you look at this, no one had to ever physically touch James Holmes. It is total David Copperfield level. No one physically touched him. He wasn't brought to a secret hideout base and hypnotized by spooky agents. This is how it works nowadays. This is exactly how it works. So you have this parallel construction of reality going along with actual reality. Now, what did someone physically have to do online or via a burner cell phone at some point? All they had to do was create a couple sock puppet accounts, create some profiles, make a call to the Batman director. This just leaves a trail, and then mail or deliver his journal to his counselor. So the actual evidence that they need before an event like this is a minimum. And I mean minimum. Look at what happened. So you have these sock puppet accounts and a phone call. The only physical stuff that had to have been done was actually getting the journal to the counselor. And who knows how that happened. Was it mailed, or did somebody just drop it off in her mail? And this is how compartmentalized this stuff is. You're going to have 1 or 2 people at the most making these sock puppet accounts and doing this. And then you're going to have some type of operator getting a hold of this same tactical gear that Holmes had. And the thing is, and you might go, James Holmes, he was caught there behind the theater. Listen, every time they do these operations, they do one thing. And that one thing is they always make at least one mistake. Always. There's at least one terrible mistake, because these are on the fly and they are crazy, crazy, lightning fast operations. And one of their biggest mistakes was there were 2 gas masks at the theater. They found 2 gas masks, the same gas mask at the theater. they found a gas mask over here and another gas mask. That makes no sense, dude. None. Holmes isn't going to plan out some SWAT attack on a movie theater and show up with 2 gas masks. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Period. And you can try to hit me up with the multiple realities. All reality is plural and mutable, and what makes sense to me may not make sense to somebody else. This doesn't make sense. Period. So they always make at least one mistake. That one mistake that they made was that there were 2 gas masks at the movie theater. And that also proves that everything that Holmes bought, there were replicas bought. And it was probably bought by Holmes for personal defense at his house. Because when you keep smelling things and dealing with things in your apartment, you start to believe that you're poisoned, especially when you're feeling funny. But just like what I talked about in the last video, radio frequency is the drug of the future. They can make you feel fucked up, poisoned, drugged, everything with radio frequency. So this is the most simple and easy to understand example of parallel construction. This is how parallel construction works. Holmes had no idea that these accounts were created and that he was online saying, will you visit me in prison? You know, they've done this to multiple people. So the James Holmes timeline is very simple. He moves to Colorado. Weird stuff starts to happen. He buys a gun. He buys defensive gear. As the RF attacks ramp up, he can't handle it. He's in bewilderment. He's scared. He drops out of school. Then after that, they got him. So the RF attacks intensify, and then Holmes begins to hear the voice of Obama, and then he's asked to meet up with these people, good cop, bad cop style, and then he eventually goes to the back of the movie theater. And then you have the parallel construction timeline where all the real shit, the evidence happened. It's very easy. This is parallel construction. Look out for Charlie.